Another London derby, another comfortable victory for Chelsea Football Club. 5-0 to the Blues versus West Ham United, and it wasn't even close. So today we're going to be taking a look at this game, explain why Chelsea were so dominant, and analyse all 5 goals. Lads, lasses and the rest of the masses, welcome to another tactical breakdown. So let's get right into this. A lot of our analysis in these last few videos has been around this new 3-2-5 system that we've been seeing, and how it has transformed the team. And whilst I'm going to talk about that, and this game was a prime example of that, I want to firstly talk about West Ham and how they set up, because they brought a lot of the problems that they experienced in this game onto themselves, and the way that they set up I don't think was the right move from David Moyes. West Ham started the first half very well, and the first 10 minutes was very good from them. They were pressing extremely hard and extremely fast onto our centre-backs and not giving us very much time. When we tried to escape this by dropping our wingers, Madueke and Mudryk, into these positions, the fullbacks would actually follow them, which is something I didn't know if they were actually going to do, and in my preview I explained that I thought that this would be something that they had to eventually do, but I didn't think they would do right away. This is something they did right away, and they got really aggressive and started pressing us, and it kind of led to that thing that we spoke about before, that drop and pop thing with Mudryk, where when he was receiving the ball, he was having to pop sideways and try and play away. Vladimir Kufal was really tight to him though, and this didn't really work for the first 10 minutes. And that's how they were trying to win the ball back and be really aggressive and try and win the ball back and create opportunities on the transition. But for the most part, they didn't really get a lot of possession, and they instead decided to play long balls from the back. Whether this was from goal kicks or free kicks in this deep area, they would be searching for the left and right channels out here with these long balls. Now, there was a few targets that they would try and hit with these. Obviously, on the right hand side, this would be Bowen. On the left hand side, instead of this being Kudus, he would drop deep, and it would be Antonio that would go over here to try and take this 1v1 versus Chalobah and beat him in the air and use his strength to try and outmuscle him, which did happen a few times. But one of the things that we saw quite a lot was actually the fullbacks, both Emerson and Kufal, getting really high into these areas as well, and those two being the target of these long goal kicks or long free kicks from the back. Obviously, as a very aerially strong team, West Ham thought that this would be a good idea to unlock us, but it didn't really end up working out that way, and obviously the problem with this is that it leaves all of this space out here on the wings when they do this. That didn't really become much of an issue for them, because for the most part they did sit back against us and they didn't really get forward, but it's worth knowing that this is what they were kind of doing, because one of the goals in particular comes from this overcommittal of players up the pitch. As I just briefly mentioned, they did drop back for the majority of the game, and out of possession when they were in their own half, they did drop off. They started off in this 4-2-3-1 like we expected them to, but they actually changed this when they were defending. It was very interesting. Instead of it being a flat 4-4-2 or anything like that, they would swap into a 4-1-4-1 with Souček being the lone DM, Alvarez getting a little bit higher next to Paquetá, Kudus obviously dropping here, Bowen dropping here, and Antonio being the lone player left up top. And the problem with this was that they were a bit narrow when they were doing this. These wingers would come in, and not only does this give us loads of time and space on the ball when we're in defensive situations like this, we can always play through these 3 triangles out here, and they didn't really give much of an issue for us. We could play that way. What it also did, and the main problem, was that it left loads of space out wide for Madueke and Mudryk, especially Madueke. When the ball would come out here to Caicedo or to Chalobah, the ball would always be fizzed into him. And before, as I mentioned in the preview, that we wanted to kind of make these 1v1s up against Emerson. Obviously the winger would drop and try and make this a 2v1, but when that happened, Palmer would just come and support Madueke, and he could easily play it to him and then go around inside if he needed to, or just recycle the ball back to Caicedo or Cucurella or whoever. Now, the reason I mention those two things is because it's those two things that actually lead to West Ham giving us this first goal, with us having so much space out in the wide areas and having so much time on the ball. But it actually comes from their own possession. They actually play this really long diagonal ball up to the left hand side where Emerson is waiting because he's committed up the pitch like Kufal has on the opposite side. He loses this 1v1 versus Chalobah, and he easily heads this back into our own possession. Now, this goal starts off in our own box. We were very patient with our passing, playing these triangles as I mentioned before, and it's that patience that kind of kills West Ham in a way. We were so patient and they were a bit impatient, and we were basically just waiting until they made a mistake in possession. So for example, what would happen is that they would try and press really high up the pitch like this, and then we just play it into the space behind them, and for the most part that's how we played our way out of danger and how we kept getting all of this space. Now, because we are playing this certain formation with us having this box midfield here, we actually outnumber them in the middle of the pitch 4-3. So that means that no matter when this goes out to one of our midfielders, no matter how they set up, we are always going to have a spare man here. And for the majority of the time, Souček, obviously playing as this DM, was having to make the choice between tracking Gallagher or tracking Palmer. And a lot of the time he tracked Gallagher because he was the one who was going to be dropping deep a lot of the time and try and collect the ball. So he was tracking Gallagher, and obviously what this does is leaves Cole Palmer absolutely massive amount of space. And what kept happening is that when Caicedo get the ball, they would trigger this press, and then he'd play it around the corner to Cole, and then we'd get all the way up the pitch from there. To further emphasise this patience and how well we were playing it around the back, there were 21 passes before the initial chance actually occurs in this move. Now, the rotations of our players, and the reason why this system is so good for us is that all of our players can rotate, was just an absolute nightmare for West Ham to defend against. We had situations where Palmer was interchanging with Madueke. We had situations where Palmer was sometimes dropping deep into Caicedo's position to collect the ball and then play forward. We had obviously Cucurella being this inverted midfielder, but sometimes actually swapping with Gallagher. So for example, Gallagher would play in this left mid role or this left back role, and Cucurella would come up more into a central midfield position. Then we even had Mudryk and Gallagher swapping positions as well. There was so much rotation. Again, Chalobah, again, as another player who's a prime example. I saw him playing as a right back up here, but also stepping into midfield, also playing as this right centre back, sometimes coming central. The movement from all of our players was just too much for West Ham to handle. They could not get a grip to any single one player because they were never in the same positions over and over again. Obviously, Cucurella being one of these culprits as well. Sometimes he would drop deep to receive the ball and play in this kind of anchor position. Other times he would try and get up here and be annoying in the other way. It's that fluidity and that unpredictability in the system that allows us to create chances, because they can no longer just decide to mark one player because they don't know who it's going to be in that position. A lot of the time, Palmer was getting so free in this position, and obviously he's our talisman. He's always going to be the one that creates chances for us, and they could not get to grips with him because he was moving all around this area and even sometimes ending up on the other side of the pitch too. They could not keep up with him, and it's from that this first goal actually happens. I'll show it on screen here. Basically, we play it through the centre with Badiashile, Benoit passes it forward to Caicedo, and again that press happens. Caicedo plays it straight through the press to Jackson, who recycles the ball. After a couple of passes, Caicedo beats the press again with a line-breaking pass to Chalobah, who has rotated into a centre-mid position as Palmer has come inside, and he lays it to Madueke on the right. In that wide position, obviously Madueke now has this 1v1 versus Emerson, and it's in those scenarios where he's so dangerous because he can go either way. He can either go around the outside or go around the inside, and obviously what he chooses to do in this scenario is to whip the ball across the face of goal and try and find Jackson in the centre. Now, Zuma does not deal with this ball well at all, and we win the second ball. Obviously, it falls to Cole Palmer, and when he gets the ball in this situation, he's never going to miss. He's always going to score from this position. Cole easily slots it away for 1-0, and it kind of proves something that I've spoken about in the past, and it's that in football, basics wins you games. We were working harder, we were winning the second balls, most importantly, and we were also just winning individual battles, and they weren't. As I usually say, we earned the right to play, and they did not. That first goal proved that, with our players reacting first to the loose balls and keeping possession. This kept happening all half, and our second goal is another prime example of all those things once again. It starts from Thiago playing through the press with ease. There's space for Madueke on the right that allows him to drive and create danger. It doesn't come to anything, but the rotation has caused issues. The ball is fizzed back into him from Palmer, and we were very forward thinking all game. Positive passing from all of the attackers and midfielders. Every single player getting on the half turn and playing forward. Even Conor Gallagher, who rarely does this, was actually doing this throughout this game. He was getting on the half turn and playing forward when we usually used to him playing it backwards or sideways and recycling possession. Even he was being very progressive. And the thing which kind of stuck out to me was the fact that we were patient, but then we sprung into life. We caught the opposition out, and Palmer's pass is exactly that. It's that injection of pace that gives them little time to react. The second ball is won by Gallagher. As I mentioned before, we were always winning all the second balls. Gallagher wins the second ball, he lashes the ball into the net with a sumptuous volley for 2-0, and you'd think that they'd have learnt their lesson, but no, the same thing happens before the third goal. The ball is won in the middle after some positive play, the second ball is won by us working harder, and we get the ball over to the right in space with Madueke. He dribbles forward and gets a shot off to win the corner, and again, it's that same situation that's arising. There's too much space for Madueke, there's too much effort by our players and not enough effort from the West Ham players to win the second balls and get the possession in their own half. And obviously the ball is whipped in from the corner from Mudryk, and it's a brilliant cross from Mudryk to the back post for Thiago Silva, who nods it back into the danger area. Noni is there to tap it into the net with his head, and the scoreline is 3-0. West Ham just could not compete with the pace, directness and confidence of our team. They seemed completely defeated, and the longer the half went on, the less they tried to intensely press, giving us more possession and West Ham less of a chance. And we almost immediately go 4-0 up after this third goal using that confidence. Once again, a rotation from the right flank causes confusion with Madueke dropping deep. The quick direct pass into Palmer on the flank takes out the midfield entirely. He cuts outside to the byline and puts the ball across the box for Gallagher, but unfortunately his touch hits the crossbar. Speaking of the crossbar, I think it's worth pointing out that despite how well we played and how poor West Ham were for large portions of this game, they did hit the bar on numerous occasions. I think Jared Bowen hit the woodwork 4 times in total in this game, and any one of those chances going in could have changed the complexion of this game, especially the first as it came right after our first goal. Fortunately for us, none of them did go in, and we go into the halftime break up by 3 goals. Now, Poch's halftime tea talks have not been great this season so far, so I was a bit worried that we might have dropped off in the second half, and David Moyes needed to get his team's act together. He makes one change. James Ward-Prowse comes on to try and control the ball in the midfield and give them more of a threat from set plays, which seemed their best chance of getting some goals in this game, to be honest now, as well as protect the centre-backs a bit more. Obviously, Alvarez in this system, in the 4-1-4-1, was pushing up and wasn't really protecting the back line. When James Ward-Prowse comes on, he was dropping deeper than Alvarez was and moving back into that 4-2-3-1 to try and protect the centre-backs. This backfired massively though, because the pressure on our centre-backs was then completely non-existent and just gave us more possession. They are punished for this massive mistake less than 2 minutes into the first half. There's not much to analyse here, it's just 2 wonderful pieces of individual magic, a beautifully guided pass from Trevor Chalobah and a perfectly timed out to in run from Madueke. 2v1 versus the goalkeeper, he puts it on a plate for Jackson to tap in for 4-0, and if West Ham were defeated before, they certainly were now, and that small boost they had from the restart went right out of the window. The rest of this half was extremely comfortable. West Ham never really gave us any major issues, and it felt like a training session for the Blues. In only the 52nd minute, there were ironic olays from the West Ham support in the away end, or whatever was left of them. The majority had left by this point. They did have a few opportunities, half chances mainly, created by the only West Ham player that looked like he cared out there, Mohamed Kudus. But that didn't amount to anything in the end, and it was Chelsea that would eventually put the final nail in the coffin. Jackson gets his second goal after Caicedo excellently wins the ball back in the middle from Souček, then plays a perfectly weighted ball into the path of Jackson, who times his run to perfection to finish in the near post for 5-0. The goal is given offside, but after a brief check from VAR, the on-field decision is overturned and the goal is given. The Blues would saunter on to the end of the game, and 5-0 was the score at the end. A mightily impressive performance from Chelsea, and we can take confidence going into the next game versus Nottingham Forest. We now sit in 7th place, just 2 points away from Newcastle in 6th, so hopefully we can get another 3 points versus them to push us up the table. The match preview for that will be coming out tomorrow, so look forward to that, but if you can't wait until then, YouTube reckons you'll enjoy one of these 2 videos in the meantime. Thank you guys so much for watching as ever, and remember, in the rain or in the dry, keep that blue flag flying high. Come on, you Blues.